Yes, I'm good, Sarah.
Perfect. Awesome. Ashley is going to be my co-pilot today, so she's going to be keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A. So if you have any questions at all throughout the presentation today, please go ahead and throw those in the chat or the Q&A. She'll be keeping an eye on those, and we'll make sure we stop periodically to get those answered. But our topic today is going to be Project Management Part 2. So what that means, we're going to be covering today the Dialogue tab, which includes RFIs, other forms of correspondence, along with meeting minutes and agendas. And then we're going to be covering the Submittals tab. So we'll walk through the full Submittals workflow and an example there. So as you can see, we're in the same project that we have been working with for all of our webinar series. That's the La Mangi Trattoria. So to give you some context there, we're building a new restaurant in the Italy Pavilion at Epcot. And we're going to start with our Dialogue tab today. This is a tab that can be accessed at any point throughout your project. So you may notice that when you first create a project in draft status, you only see 3 tabs here within your project. You've got the Team tab, the Scope tab, and the Dialogue tab. And as you move along, you get more functionality. But that Dialogue tab never changes. You have full access to RFIs, correspondence, and meeting minutes and agendas from the draft stage all the way through in progress. So the primary thing that I see here when I come to the Dialogue tab is this Manage Correspondence page. Now, there are 3 pages here, so we're going to go through each of those today. The Issues and the Meeting Minutes pages are also over here under the Manage icon, but the default is the Correspondence page. That's where we come when we click on the tab. And what this allows us to do is send and store different forms of correspondence within our project. So we can come here to the New icon, as we would on any page, to create something new, and click New in order to see our list of document templates. Now, generally, when I walk folks through our training database here, which is where we're at today, I warn them that they're not going to see nearly as many document templates in your own database as you're seeing here in our training database, right? We make a lot of sample document templates in order to train ourselves and each other here within the training database. But what you're most likely going to see is a few initial document templates. So things like letterhead, or if we come in here and look at RFIs, right, you'll see a basic request for information. You're probably going to see a transmittal letter and a couple of other just sample, send email, that type of thing that we'll start you out with. But there's no limit to how many document templates you can have in here. So your system administrators are able to go to the configuration menu and build additional document templates anytime they're needed. Now, that might mean that you have several different types of RFIs. That might mean you have several different types of letterhead or transmittal letters, whatever else you may need. And if you're uncertain how to create a document template, you can always reach out to us for help. What we're going to walk through today is a basic RFI. But I can come here to select any of my existing document templates and create a piece of correspondence. So this is great for form letters that I may send out on a regular basis. I just want to be able to pull up that template, plug in some project-specific information, and send it out as needed. So we're going to fill in a basic RFI today. Now, no matter what document template I pick, the steps are going to be pretty similar. I'm going to fill in the blanks, attach any documents that I may need to send with it, and then I'll be able to preview that document before I send it out. So anything that has an orange asterisk on this first page is required information, and that may vary depending on the document template you're filling in. Anything that doesn't have an orange asterisk is optional. So this first one up here is issue, and that is optional. So what is an issue within your RedTeam Flex database? An issue is what I like to call a topic of discussion. Now, when we initially create a project, we don't have any open issues. We don't have any topics of discussion because we haven't discussed anything yet. So as we move through the project, I can create those as needed and use them to track different topics. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new one. We have a default list of common issues that you may choose to use, or you can also create your own. Now I'm going to go ahead and create my own. And I'm going to say kitchen tile is the subject. And then in the narrative, I can go ahead and describe what this topic covers, right? Or maybe we'll just call this kitchen, right? And we're going to ask a topic or a question in particular about tile, but we may want to have the topic of kitchen for our restaurant so that we can house all questions regarding the kitchen under there. And we'll go ahead and give this a date if we'd like, and we can save. Now, once I create that issue or topic of kitchen, it will be available throughout the remainder of the project. So I can go ahead and pick the topic or issue of kitchen in future RFIs or other pieces of correspondence to tie them all together. You're also going to see that issues come into play in our meeting minutes and agendas because those are going to be our topic headings as we create a meeting. So moving down from there, you'll notice our ID field here fills itself in. This is our RFI number. So that's going to go ahead and fill itself in sequentially, and it'll keep track of what RFI this is. Created date fills itself in as today, and then our required date would be the date by which we need an answer. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through to next month and say we need an answer by the end of next week. Right, that's plenty of time, even with the long weekend. We can go ahead and indicate our author. Now, our author is generally going to autofill the project manager for this project, but if we'd like, we can go ahead and add someone else from our team or search for your own name. We need to pick our recipient. Who are we sending this to? And in that case, we can go ahead and select from any of our team members here, or any of our companies that are a part of the project. So we'll send this to Sarah. And then we can CC anyone that we'd like on our team. We click add, and we're going to be able to add not just one person, but as many as we need. And you can see here, I can filter and search through my contacts to find the right people to CC on this RFI. Right now, I'm looking at team members for this project only, but I can also narrow that down and say just my employees. Service provider is you, customers, third parties, or vendors. I can also see potential team members who belong to companies that are involved in this project, or all contacts if I want to look through my entire contact list. So we can CC as many people as we'd like. And then we can indicate in certain places, if you create a custom document template, you may have fields like this, received from. Now, this is not something you're going to see on your basic RFI template, but this is something we've added to ours. So you can have additional fields here to reflect information. Maybe I'm passing this question on from one of my vendors. They asked me a question and I need to ask someone else. I can create a custom field for that and then add an individual here. We can do the same thing down below, where below these typical fields, we can have additional boxes if needed for custom information. Now, some other standard fields would be description, which is essentially the title of this RFI. So I'm going to say kitchen tile information. We need some information on the kitchen tile. We can put in a reference here. I can say see attached photos. And then I can put in my question. And I'm going to go ahead and say, please clarify desired tile pattern from the attached photos. Right, so I have space to type in as much as I need. I can copy and paste from another source of information. I have some formatting capabilities up here. And once I have all the information that I'm asking for in this question field, I simply hit save. And then the last field here, which is optional, is suggestion. I can go ahead and click update to voice my professional opinion. I can say pattern 1 has the best wear life. Right, so I think that tile in that particular pattern would be the most durable for them, and I can indicate that that's why I think that would be the best choice. And we save. Right? You don't have to put anything in there, but it's a good chance to, like I said, voice that professional opinion. Now, company confidential down here, you'll see this in several places throughout Red Team. That checkbox is always just allowing you to say, I want to keep this particular piece of information more private. In this case, I'm saying that I'd like the opportunity to keep this RFI off of my project reports. So when I generate a project report for RFIs, I can choose to exclude company confidential RFIs. That allows me to keep certain topics closer to the vest and not have to share those on reports with my customer. You can also indicate which of your employees has the permission to view company confidential items and which employees do not. So I'm going to pause here. I know there's a lot of information in this field. Any questions at all so far?
No, it looks like we're good, Sarah.
Perfect. Then we're going to keep walking through. When we are ready to move to the next step, I can either hit next step up here, or I can simply click the step I want to go to along the left-hand side, whichever works for you. We always get an attachment step, no matter what type of document we're creating here in the dialog tab. So if I'd like to attach anything, I can go ahead and link to an existing attachment within the project. I don't need to upload it again. It's already in here somewhere. So that allows me to do things like come to my plans and specifications and checkbox that I want to keep a particular document from my plans and specs, and I want to attach it here, right? So that allows me to bring in things that I've already uploaded. My other option is to either drag and drop or browse for files that haven't been added into this project yet. So we're going to go ahead and add some files. And I can come here. We'll look through our sample photos. We've got a couple of different tile options there. We'll go ahead and pull those in and we'll say tile pattern. And notice I can title them here. Tile pattern 1. Now that title or that description does come in from the file name. So it's auto-populated for me, but I want to update that. Tile pattern 1 and tile pattern 2. And then I can start the upload. Now, once I have all the files that I want, I can move on to the next step, which is just a confirmation. This is letting me know that I have created it and asking what steps I want to take from here. Now I can preview the RFI before I send it, which I absolutely recommend previewing it at least once before you commit it and send it out. I can create an action item. This is a great opportunity to pass off the next steps to someone else. If I've done my piece and I need my supervisor to go ahead and review this before it goes out, I can create an action item for them, asking them to review and commit it. Otherwise, I can just add notes for anyone who may come back and take a look at that RFI in future. So let's go ahead and view it. Again, I always recommend that someone should preview the document before it gets sent out. This is going to open it in a separate browser tab, and we're going to have a preview of this draft document. So you can see all the information we entered, along with our subject, kitchen tile information and our reference. And then we have our attachments. Now this PDF is simply, we have the title and we have a hyperlink. But if I attached a photo, we can see that that photo is previewed here along with a hyperlink that's going to allow them to access and download that particular photo file. Now down at the bottom, we're seeing our question and our suggestion there. And we see this nice draft watermark. That's letting us know that this is not a final copy yet. So we can still go back and edit, meaning if you look at this and you need to make changes, you can come back to your dialog tab and click on the pencil to go ahead and edit this. Now I know it's in draft as long as it's in green text and the status here will say draft. From that point, I can come in and edit or even delete this if I need. But when I'm ready and I think this looks good, I'm ready to send it out, I can go ahead and commit it right while I'm previewing it. That's going to reload this file without the draft watermarks. You can see it's thinking there. It's going to reload this page. And now I'm ready to go ahead and send it out. We can hit the email button to send it out. And that's going to auto-populate our recipient here. So we can see that we are sending that to Sarah. We can see the email address right there for Sarah. And then we can see who's being CC'd. Now, Ashley, as the author, is being CC'd automatically. Now, she's the project manager on this project, so she was listed as the author. If I had changed it to myself, I would be listed here. We can also click the to or the CC button to add additional people. Those are buttons. That's why they're in blue. We can add external CCs. Those are individuals who are not within your Red Team contacts list, but you do want to include them on this RFI. In that case, I can simply type in their email address right here or several separated by commas. I can add blind carbon copies and I can add a message. This just allows me to add some additional context for a recipient who maybe has not seen these RFI emails before. I can tell them that they need to go to the bottom and click the click here link in order to view and put in their answer. Whatever information I may want, that's going to show up top of the form email so that I can just add a little bit of context. I would hit send. Now I'm not actually going to send this one out, but when I hit send, my recipient is going to receive an email that essentially says, you've received a request for information, please click here. We can actually open that up. I'm going to shift over right now and show you in my junk mail here. We've got a sample RFI we can look for here. So this is what the email is going to look like. It's going to come from me because I sent it out. So it's not going to come from noreply@redteam.com. Whoever receives it will see the RFI number and name, the project name and number, and they're going to see that it came from you. There's that message. If you chose to type a message up top, I'm just letting them know, hey, please use the click here link. They'll see the basic project information, who it's from and who was included. And then this is that click here link. So that's why I say it's useful to give folks some context the first time they see this, because it's easy to miss that link. They can click here, or they've got another opportunity to click down here. So returning back, when they click that click here link, they're going to see exactly what we're seeing right now. It's going to open this same RFI document for them in a new browser tab. They'll be able to scroll through and review all the information, open and download the files if they need. And then at the very bottom below the suggestion, they're going to have a text box where they can type in their answer and hit submit. It's really that simple. If they have any questions or concerns before they submit their answer, that's where our collaborative console comes in over here. So this comments panel exists for any document you may send out from the dialogue tab, and anyone who is a collaborator, meaning anyone who was involved in the email that was sent for this RFI, is going to be able to participate in the comments panel. So you can see my responder is Sarah with 10,000 volts architecture, whereas Ashley is simply a commenter. So Ashley will be able to comment over here on the side in order to communicate with the recipient, but only Sarah, our recipient, will be able to type in an answer at the bottom. So Sarah could come in here and ask me a question. Everyone who's a collaborator gets an email when a comment is posted. That way, I know to come in here and look. I can see her question and answer it. We can even pass attachments back and forth. And that keeps all of our discussion about this document tied to the document directly, so that you don't have to search back through your email inbox to find prior discussion history. So now from here, the question becomes, how do they answer? Right, so let's go back to our main page here, our dialogue tab. We can see that our RFI is committed and it's due in 7 days. It's not answered yet, so we don't see anything in the answered column. You will get a notification when the answer is submitted, but we know that some of your recipients may get confused or have trouble from time to time. So if they're uncertain how to answer and they just reply to that email, it will come right back to your email. You'll receive it in your Outlook or Gmail inbox, and you can go ahead and answer in RedTeam Flex on their behalf. So to do that, I can go ahead and hit the tools icon, and that's going to allow me to answer on their behalf. Now I have to have the permissions to do that, but if I'm someone with the permissions, I can say, hey, they gave me their answer in some other way. They got confused. They didn't type it in at the bottom of that RFI that I sent them. So we'll go ahead and hit answer. And all I need to do here is scroll down to the response section, indicate who responded. So Sarah, my recipient, responded, and she responded today. I can go ahead and say that they would prefer tile pattern 1, right? So that's what they would like. They want to go with tile pattern 1. We can attach anything that came back with their answer. So maybe they sent us a photo, maybe they sent us a document, or maybe we just want to attach their email so that we can prove we received their answer. Again, you'll notice the ability for custom fields in the response section. So in general, what's standard for our default RFI is just the answer and the attachment. But if you'd like, if you create any custom RFI forms, you can add additional fields down here. You can have additional text boxes, date fields, or check boxes. You can see here, I may be asking a vendor if this is going to have any time or cost impact. I could put in a follow-up date. These are just examples of custom fields that you could create for your RFIs. Once we filled in the answer, we'll go ahead and hit next step to save the information. Now, every time an answer is submitted, like I said, if the recipient put in the answer, every collaborator gets an email notification. This is asking if you'd still like to send that notification. We're going to say no, but you can send it out to let everyone know that the answer is in if you'd like. And then we'll hit next step one more time. Again, I need to leave this page to make sure the information saves, and then we'll go ahead and close out that form. So now we can see our RFI is answered. And from there, we can continue to review that RFI form and have any follow-up discussion as needed. But before we proceed to that, are there any questions at all at the moment?
No questions.
Perfect. Then let's keep rolling. We're going to go ahead and view that RFI so you can see what the answer will look like once it's in. I'm clicking that little document next to the RFI in the dialog tab. We come back to that same form, and as I scroll to the bottom, you're going to see the response now. We can see who answered, what date, and what their answer was. We also see a date and timestamp of the answer in the comments panel. That's going to help you separate any pre-answer discussion that you may have had from any post-answer discussion. So like I said, we can continue to discuss this even after the answer is submitted. Once we've had any follow-up discussion that's needed, we can go ahead and come back here and hit the tools icon to change the status of this RFI to closed. That just marks it as resolved and kind of closes things out. So when I hit close, it's asking me if I want to add any final notes. If I do, they'll show up in the notes column over here. I'm going to say no, and then it's going to turn gray. Now, as I refresh the dialog tab, if I click on it again, that dialog tab will reload and I don't see my RFI, but it's not gone. We've just sort of archived it for you. So down below, you can see there is one closed document to view select filter options. We auto filter this correspondence page to show only draft and committed items. That's items that still need your attention. If they've been closed, you'll need to come to the filter icon and go ahead and change the status to closed. I want to see only my closed items so that I can review them. We'll hit filter to filter the list. That keeps these filter options open, or I can hit filter and hide, which will go ahead and close up those filter options. So there's my RFI. I can come back and see the files that were attached or the document itself anytime that I want. Now, and I'm going to pause for just a second. Ashley's telling me she can't hear me anymore. Christina, I believe you're on the meeting as well. If you can hear me, can you just go ahead and type that into the chat for me to let me know that you can hear me? I don't want to proceed if nobody can hear me. Okay, Christina, I've given you the opportunity to unmute. Can you just tell me if you can hear me?
I can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Then I will go ahead and place you back on mute here so we can keep going. I will keep an eye on the chat. It just sounds like my partner Ashley is not able to hear us right now. So from here, we've got our RFI closed out. Like I said, we can check back in on those files or that document anytime we want. But that really concludes the document or correspondence portion, right? So that's one of our 3 pages here in the dialog tab. The only other thing I want to mention about the correspondence page before we move on is that if you look in the home icon of any project and you come down here to the bottom, you're going to find an email address that's specific to this project. And what happens is if we send any emails to this address, they'll be saved in the dialog tab. So from a practicality standpoint, what that means is that if I'm having an important email conversation, I can CC that email address and that email chain is going to drop here into the dialog tab. I can also email in spreadsheets or Word documents, any files that I'd like to keep on file for my team can be stored here in the dialog tab. Now, those are viewable internally to my employees only. They're not going to be something that's shared with external parties like vendors or customers. To do that, you'd want to share a file in the plan room. But that email address can allow you to store static internal documents for reference that your employees can come to the dialog tab and view as needed. Now, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat at the moment, so I am going to go ahead and move on to meeting minutes. But if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them there, and we can always come back to them. So the next place that we're going to go is over to the meeting minutes page. Now, this is where we house all meeting minutes and agendas, and we can simply click the new icon to create either an agenda, which is a form for an upcoming meeting. We can plan ahead and invite folks to the meeting and track what we plan to talk about, or we can skip over the agenda stage and we can go ahead and create a set of minutes that reflects what we talked about. So we're going to go the long way. We're going to go ahead and create the agenda first, but you can skip straight to minutes if you prefer not to use the agenda piece. So now we see another set of steps. Similar to the RFI, we want to go ahead and fill in the blanks that we see. We're going to plan out the issues we're going to talk about, and then we can go ahead and add any attachments. So let me pause just a moment. I'm getting some notes from Ashley that I want to make sure I don't pass by. Okay, perfect. We're all right to proceed. Sorry about that. So we're going to go ahead and fill in the blanks here. First, we need to know what type of meeting we are having. Now, you'll notice we've got some default meeting types. Again, you probably won't see a list quite this long because we've added some additional meeting types here in our training database, but we give you 4 or 5 different types of default meeting types that you can pick from. You can also add to your meeting types in the configuration menu, but we're going to come down here and say we're having a safety meeting, and I'm going to put in the date. The date is going to be, let's call it Monday. Well, actually, we'll be closed Monday. Let's call it Tuesday. So now as I click out of that date field, notice it's processing. You may have missed that little note up here. It said, your request is being processed. Please wait. What it's processing for is to see if I've ever had a meeting of this type on this project before, and I have not. So it's going to give it an ID of 001. That meeting ID number tracks by meeting type. So if I had a general type meeting or a pre-construction meeting next, it would still be ID 001 because it's the first meeting of that type. Now, if I had had 2 safety meetings prior to this, we have an ID of 003, but we also auto-populate all the information from meeting 2. So that's what it's checking for, is if you've had previous meetings of that type, we're going to fill in the information from the last meeting to save you time. If you're inviting the same folks every week and talking over the same topics, you don't want to have to create this from scratch every single week. So then we can fill in the rest. We want our start and end time. We can adjust the time zone. We can put in our purpose. I'm going to call this week 1 safety meeting. We can put in a venue that is a physical location like a conference room, or we could copy and paste a meeting link if we want. And then we can go ahead and pick the author. So I'm going to go ahead and find myself. But we could pick from anyone on our project team or our employees list. We can add invitees. Who's going to be invited to this meeting? That allows us to, again, search through our contacts. So we can say, hey, this is going to be an employees only meeting. And then we can go ahead and include several folks from our employees list who are team members on this project, right? We could also invite vendors or customers, anyone we need. If I invited someone by mistake, I can click the X to remove them, and I can click add invitees to add more folks at any time. Other invitees here allows you to type in email addresses that are not part of your contacts list. So just like that external CC, I can type in email addresses here and separate by commas. We've got notes down here. Now, these are general overview notes. This is not where you need to specify everything we're going to talk about for this meeting. That's going to happen in step 2. So here, we're simply going to say general overview notes. Maybe you're giving people instructions about where we're meeting, what they need to bring, what they need to do to prepare for the meeting, anything like that. Notice that we do have space to drag this down. If you take that right-hand corner and drag downwards, you have space to type several paragraphs. You can expand this as you need. And then we'll move on to the next step, which is to determine what we're going to talk about. And here's that term issues again. So issues are the topics of discussion. And we can see that under the dropdown, the issue of kitchen is already here. So I can add issues that already exist within the project, and I can add new issues. Notice the add new button. Again, that's permission dependent if you're someone who has the ability to add new issues. We can add a new one here, and we're going to call this safety walkthroughs. And I can put in a narrative here. So I can go ahead and say, we are going to review all near misses and safety violations for the past week. Everything found in our walkthroughs. Right, so we've put a description in there. And then we can arrange these issues in any order that we want. If we say, hey, we're going to talk about the safety walkthroughs first, and then we're specifically going to talk about any issues in the kitchen, we can go ahead and drag and drop. Notice that saves automatically. So I can drag and drop these into the order I want. And when I hit back, it's going to go ahead and reflect that here. Now, both of these say no discussions, which means they've never been talked about on a previous meeting. If they had been talked about previously, we would have some historical discussions to choose from, and I'd be able to checkbox which historical discussions should appear on the meeting agenda. That would allow me to include discussions from last week or last month so that folks can preview those, right? Review them and be ready to discuss them or pick up where we left off when we meet on Tuesday. But once I've got all the issues I want in here, we can go ahead and move on to the next step, which as always is just an attachment opportunity. This is the same attachment page that you saw with the RFI. You can link to something existing within the project, or you can upload your own files. You don't have to attach anything, it's just an option. And then we'll go ahead and close the form. So we've created our meeting agenda, and we've got it right here as a draft. You can see it's a safety type. The meeting ID is 001, and the stage says agenda, which lets me know that the meeting hasn't happened yet. Even more, it's a draft agenda, which is why it shows in green text. And what that means is I can go ahead and preview the agenda form before I send it out. So we'll go ahead and open that up. We can see that draft watermark letting us know that it's not a final copy. This is our meeting agenda form. You have the basic when and where of the meeting up top. You have who's invited. We're going to show their name, their company, their contact information, all right here. And then notice we're going to leave you some space to take attendance so that if this is a large meeting, you can check folks off as they come in. You can put this on the door and ask people to initial as they walk into the meeting. However you would like to take attendance, you've got a little space there to do so. There's our general overview notes, any notes we chose to put in above the agenda. And then here are the two topics we chose that we're going to discuss, these two issues, safety walkthroughs and the kitchen. And we can see that that narrative that I put in, or that description of the issue, will show every time we discuss that issue. So it's going to let us know that when we say safety walkthroughs, what we mean is reviewing all safety violations found in those walkthroughs over the past week. So if we're happy with this, we can go ahead and commit it and send it out. If not, we have the pencil to go back and edit and basically walk back through all of those steps that we just walked through. So I'm going to go ahead and commit this. We're happy with it. As I commit an agenda, it's going to ask if I want to send invitations. If I say yes, and I send those out, everyone on the invitees list is going to receive an email with a copy of this document, along with a calendar invite, a calendar invite that allows them to add that to their Gmail or their Outlook, whatever the calendar they may use. So we're not going to send them, but we can. If I say don't send, I can always choose to come back and send those later. So now we'll go ahead and come back to that main window. And what we're going to see is that we can come here to the tools icon and send those invitations later, anytime that we want. Now let's go ahead and imagine that the meeting's happened. So it's Tuesday, the meeting's taken place. At this point, I can come in and hit my tools icon to go ahead and add minutes. Notice the create minutes option right there. However, if I didn't create an agenda, again, remember I can come back here and just hit meeting minutes anytime that I want. So we're going to go ahead and add meeting minutes to this. You'll see that this is a much quicker process if you create an agenda first. It's essentially going to bring us back to the same set of steps, but every piece of information for this meeting is already filled in with the exception of what we talked about. So I can simply make any tweaks or edits needed. The when and where of the meeting, if everything went off as planned, I can leave this the same. Under participants, we can indicate who was present and who was not. From everyone who was invited, we can say Aaron wasn't able to make it, but everyone else did. So I can use this arrow to shift folks back and forth between present and not present. I can remove people if I don't want them to be listed on the meeting minutes at all. I can go ahead and click the X. Or I can add additional people who maybe weren't on my invitees list, but they did come to the meeting. Other participants, again, is for folks who are not in your contact list in RedTeam Flex. You can go ahead and type in an email address. And then we can update our general overview notes here. If we need any change to those notes, we can. And then we'll move on to the next step. This is where the real work happens when it comes to meeting minutes. This is where we add discussions to indicate what we talked about under each issue or topic. We can add additional issues if there's something we talked about that wasn't planned on the agenda. And we can also arrange them in a different order if we talked about them in a different order than what we planned. So we're just going to go ahead and add a discussion here. Now I can have multiple discussions per issue. Maybe I want to make a separate discussion for each safety violation that we talk about for this week. Hopefully there's not very many of them, but if I have multiple points underneath that issue and I want to separate those as different discussions, I can do so. Otherwise, we can go ahead and say here, maybe we had an electrical exposure issue. And we can go ahead and describe under the narrative everything that we talked about. So exposed wires found in the restrooms, right? And we can put in an action plan. Electrician will correct by end of day, right? So that's a safety issue that's really important for us. So we're going to say, hey, our electrician is going to get that corrected by the end of the day. And in that case, we can indicate, well, who's responsible for that? If we have action that needs to be taken, we can select a single person who was at the meeting. We can select everyone, as in everyone's going to turn in this form by the end of the week, or we can say no action required if there is no action plan needed. Now I'm going to go ahead and say Elaine is going to take care of this. Either they are our electrician or they're going to contact that electrician and make sure that gets corrected today. If I list an individual as responsible, their name will show as responsible on the meeting minutes, but they will not be automatically notified. So if you'd like to notify them that they need to take action, you can check this box to send them an action item. That's a trackable task that you can send them. They'll receive an email with the information and the due date, and then you can go ahead and track that task to completion within the action items page of your project. We can also set that person a due date. So we said by end of day, that needs to take place today. Let's go ahead and save. Now I can see that that safety walkthroughs topic has one discussion, and I can expand to open that up and see that discussion here along with any historical discussions. So we just continue to add discussions as needed until we've reflected everything we talked about in this meeting. Let's say we didn't get around to talking about the kitchen. We can also delete a topic or an issue if we didn't get around to talking about it in the actual meeting. But once this page reflects exactly what we talked about, we can move on to the next step, which is again, attachments. Anything that I'd like to send out with the meeting minutes after the meeting occurs can go right here. Then we'll close the form. And now we have our draft meeting. So from here, we want to preview that set of meeting minutes. Now, if you're wondering, where did the agenda go? It is still accessible. Under the tools icon, we can view our old agenda or we can view the minutes. So we're going to go ahead and view the minutes right from here with the dial or with the document button here. And that's going to allow us to go ahead and preview this form. Now it looks very similar to the agenda. The difference is the present and not present section. So instead of just an invitees section, you're going to see who was there and who was not. We still include everyone's email and phone number. And then down here, we see every open historical discussion. So you wouldn't just see what you talked about today. You'd see what you talked about today along with any previous historical discussions that have not been marked closed. Now, keep that in mind. I'm going to show you how to close out a discussion here shortly. But what that means is that if, for example, this electrical exposures needs to be followed up on, we can leave this one open. And next week, when we talk about safety walkthroughs again, this topic will show up. This discussion will show up so that we can see that we needed to follow up, who was responsible and what action plan needed to take place. So if I'm happy with this set of meeting minutes, I can go ahead and commit it. If not, I've got the pencil to go back and make edits. We'll go ahead and commit it. It's double checking. Are you sure? Once we commit it, there's no editing allowed. The draft watermark will be removed. And we're okay to just go ahead and email that out anytime that we'd like. Now, you don't have to email out your meeting minutes to anyone. You can simply store them here for reference, but you can email them or print them as a PDF anytime you'd like. So that should do it for our meeting minutes page. I don't see any questions again at this time, so I'm going to keep moving. But if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Our last page here in the dialogue tab is going to be the issues page. So we'll go ahead and go to issues. This is where you can see those topics of discussion. You can expand these out to be able to see the discussions that have taken place underneath that particular topic. And we can see the status here of open for all of these. So if I want to close out a discussion, meaning I don't want to revisit this particular discussion from this particular day ever again, I can close, mark it resolved as of today. You've got the calendar there if you want to edit, and hit save. Now, this discussion about electrical exposures from January 3rd is never going to show up on any future agendas or meeting minutes. So now, the last thing we want to see is the record that we have with each particular topic. So if I go ahead and click the document icon here, I can see a record of all discussions ever had for this particular issue and any related documents. So by related documents, we mean things like RFIs. So if I open this kitchen issue and look at the record, we don't have any discussions, but we do have that RFI. So we're going to track all documents and discussion related to that issue here in one place, which just allows you to keep tabs on the entire history of that topic. So that should do it for our dialogue tab. From here, the next thing we're going to talk about is submittals, and that should take us to the end of our webinar today. Under our submittals tab, we can go ahead and manage our submittals workflow, and that can be taken care of anywhere from the request stage onwards. And we have several pages here within, but again, our default is the workflow. So we're going to talk about the other pages that are in here, but we're going to start on the workflow, which is where you come when you first click on the tab. That allows us to walk our submittals through what is essentially a 9-step process. Now that looks like a lot. I generally warn folks that submittals looks a little overwhelming the first time you see it, but it's really not bad. It boils down to 3 emails. This is a 3-email process. You're going to decide what items you need, and you're going to send an email to your vendor asking for those items. When you receive those submittal items from your vendor, you'll review them and send a second email, submitting them to your approver, asking them to approve or reject those items. Once you receive that approval or rejection, that's the answer, you'll send a third and final email notifying your vendor of what the answer was. And they will go ahead and acknowledge, right? So that's our 9 steps. It really comes down to 3 emails. Send an email to ask for what you need, send a second email to get it approved, and send a third email to notify the submitter what the answer was. So we're going to walk through an example here today. We're going to go ahead and hit the new icon. I can add individual submittal items. I can bring in default items. You can create a default list of submittal items in your configuration menu so that you can simply checkbox them and bring them in more quickly. I can import submittals from a spreadsheet or from PlanGrid. But we're just going to go ahead and create a couple of sample items from scratch here. So when I say add a submittal item, these are all required fields. So I need a referenced section, which is generally my spec section. I'm going to go ahead and put an example section, but you can type in whatever you'd like. We need a subject. Here, I'm going to go ahead and say materials information. The type is really where we pick the items that we need. The type dropdown allows us a default list of various types of submittal items that you may need. If you don't see what you're looking for, your administrators have the permission to add new types of submittals to this list, and they'll be a permanent option on all projects. But we're just going to go ahead and say we need a materials certificate and a mixed design. Each type that I pick will be one submittal item, and you'll see how that plays out here in a moment. I need to fill in the cost code. So we can go ahead and pick from cost codes that have been planned for this project. We'll go ahead and find one here and say that this is related to concrete. We then can pick our critical date, which is the date by which we need the approver to answer. So I can go ahead and say, I need that second email to be answered. Let's say by the end of January. So January 31st, I need my approver's answer on those submitted items, which means my required date, the date I need the initial submission from the vendor, is going to need to be a little sooner than that. I'm going to go ahead and give them until the end of the second week of January. That gives me 2 full weeks to review and get the approval back from my approver. Now, the last thing you see here is a checkbox for submittals. That is asking you if this is a true submittal item or if it's something else, like maybe a closeout document. You can use this submittals page for any document that follows that 3-email kind of system. If I need to ask someone for it, get it approved, and then inform that initial sender of the answer, I can do that here. So this just is for reporting purposes. If it's not a true submittal item, you'll want to uncheck the box so that when you're pulling your submittal log, you can sort out what's a true submittal item and what's not. So let's go ahead and save. Just create these 2 items. Notice I do have a save and new button to go ahead and create additional items as needed. We'll just get these 2 items. They'll drop here into just created. Now, depending on your database settings, they may jump straight into step 2, which is committed. And if that's the case, that's perfectly fine. If you need to make edits, you would just hit the tools icon and select uncommit to bring them back up here to step 1, where you can make edits. Edits to the name, the types, the due dates, anything like that. But if I've put all that information in properly, then I can simply checkbox these items as a single item or in groups and commit them to move them down to step 2. Now, from that point, like I said, we won't be able to change the title, the reference section, anything like that, the due dates. If we need to make edits, we would then go ahead and hit the tools icon and uncommit to move it back up. Now, each of these steps is essentially a folder that you can expand and collapse, and that little red number indicates how many items are sitting in that step. So I have 2 items sitting in my committed step. We can see they've been numbered 1 and 2, and we get a different one for each type. There's my material certificate and there's my mixed design. So each type that you choose will become its own submittal item. Now from here, if you remember nothing else that I say about submittals, all you need to know is to follow the next step. And in order to follow that next step, you're generally going to use the tools icon and look for the option that matches the next step. So request for submittals matches here. Step 2, however, is actually the only place where we have 2 options for our next step. Upload allows us to imagine that we already have those submittal items on hand. If I don't need to request them from my vendor or my submitter, I'm ready to skip a few steps. And in that case, I could simply upload the files that I have or the items that I have. To do that, I would hit the pencil. And I would be able to skip over the requested and received portion by coming down here and filling in who did I receive them from, what company and what individual, what date did I request them, what was the due date and how many copies. Once I fill that in, I'll be able to fill in the date that I received that item and what form that item took. Was it an electronic attachment, a physical item? It's going to ask me for the tracking number, or cloud storage. It's going to ask me for the URL if that was sent to me in Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that. And then I can also choose to fill in the reviewed stage right now if I want. If I already have it on hand, I can go ahead and mark it reviewed as of today and indicate what form I am sending on to the approver. Am I sending them an electronic attachment? Am I shipping it to them or putting it in a Dropbox? So as I fill all of that out, it's going to skip me from committed straight to reviewed, and that'll skip over that first email. So I'll be ready to just send my second email out to the approver. Now we're going to go the long way today. So we're going to go ahead and grab these two items. Now notice I can use the checkboxes to move items through in groups, or I can simply select one item by hitting the tools icon for that item. And I'm going to go ahead and use the other option, request for submittals. That is me creating the first email to send out to my vendor asking for what I need. So let's go ahead and request. I'm going to fill in the information for that email. Who's it coming from? Who's my author? Again, this is Ashley because she's the project manager, but I can change it to myself if I want. Who's the provider? Let's say Able Pavement and Concrete, right? They're a team member on this project. I want to get that information from them. And then we can go ahead and request it today, required on the 13th, right? If I need to edit either of those dates, I can. Put in any instructions if you need to add them additional instructions or information, and then double check that you've got all the items you need from them, right? I need this single vendor to submit both of these items. Moving them through in groups allows me to consolidate the number of emails that I'm sending to a given vendor. So let's go ahead and save this once the information's filled in. And then I'm going to go ahead and view that piece of information. So I can open up this email that I'm going to be sending to them. That's what I'm seeing here in this request for submittal. I'm seeing the email document that I'm going to be sending out to that vendor. So there's the to and from fields. We can see any additional information, which is including any instructions I chose to type in, and then the items that we need from them. Now, if I'm happy with all this information, again, I want to commit it. If not, I'll go back and edit with the pencil. But once I commit it and I email it out, that recipient is going to open it much like we did with an RFI. So I can go ahead and email this out. I'm actually going to email it because it's going to appear in my junk mail, and we'll show you what that looks like. So we will type a message here. Please use the link below to submit your items ASAP, right? I can put in whatever message I want and hit send. We'll close that out, right? Just a confirmation. Now from there, I wait. I've sent it out. And if I refresh this submittals tab, my submittal page is going to know that, right? So it can see I emailed these and they're due on the 13th. It tells me that I emailed them out. So I know that I'm just waiting. Now let's go ahead and take a look at my junk mail here. And let's refresh this to see if we've got that new one. There it is, submittals request, right? So it's letting them know it's requesting submittals for materials information. That's the subject you typed in, the number and name of the project. And we can come in, you see my message up top. We scroll down to the bottom, just like we did with the RFI, and we click here. It's going to open that in another field, in another browser tab. And we can see the due date up top and all the project information right here. And then it's as simple as clicking the submit button. So your vendor that you sent this to can submit one item at a time, or they can submit all of them at the same time. They just need to hold on to the email until they finish submitting all items. That being said, if they delete the email, you have the ability to resend it. But let's go ahead and click submit. And we can see all the information is filled in for them. So all they need to do is indicate what their submittal item is comprised of: electronic attachment, cloud storage, or physical item. Or if it's none of those, they can note what it is and how they're submitting it to us. Let's go with electronic attachment. We can drag and drop a file, but I'm just going to go ahead and browse for one here. Let's grab this sample basement plan. And we can title it. I'm going to title that materials certificate, which is what we were asking them to submit. So let's start upload. And once we've got all the files, they can go ahead and hit save. Now we can see at the bottom, it's telling them that they've already submitted this one. So there's no more button. And then we can submit this mix design. And let's say that this one, for whatever reason, was a physical item. They can simply put in the tracking number. Or if it's cloud storage, they'd put in the URL. And again, we'll hit save. Now, once they've submitted all items, you will get a notification. So let's go back over here. You'll be notified once these are received. However, note that if your vendor has trouble, the same way you could with the RFI, you can answer on their behalf right here. We can hit receive submittals, and that's going to allow us to basically answer for them. Upload the items or put in the tracking number, whatever the case may be. We can indicate that we received those items on their behalf. But I'm going to refresh the page. And we can see that those items have dropped down into received, from requested to received. Now we can see those files that were uploaded, and we can see that our next step is ready to review. So from this point, whoever's job it is to review is going to go ahead and review submittals here. And we simply mark the date that we reviewed it and what type of submittal we're sending on to the approver. Now, this is where I like to note a really nice new feature that we've added, which is the ability to mark up or stamp documents right here that you've received in order to send them on to the approver. So when I'm marking something reviewed, I can simply click on this file to view it. And not only can I view it, but I also have this stamp and markup button. This is a brand new feature as of December 15th that we can use so that you don't need to download and edit any files that are submitted. If you get an electronic attachment and you need to stamp it or mark it up before you send it to the approver, you simply hit that button. And we have the ability to use all the same markup tools that you've seen in our plans and specs section as we're working with our drawings. We can also stamp. Right, so here we get the ability to go ahead and put in the name of the reviewer, the status. You can add additional statuses in configuration, and the disclaimer. Now you can change this language, but if you want to change the default language that pops up here every time, that's also done in your configuration menu under submittal settings. You can choose the color that you want the stamp to appear in, and then go ahead and preview it. That's what it's going to look like. We can go back if we want to make changes. And then once we apply, that stamp shows up nice and big here. We can click to drag it and we can resize it. So I can bring it down to the size that I want and put it in exactly the place that I need it. There's my stamp. I can make any other markups to call out anything else that I need to my approver. And then we go ahead and hit back. It's going to save automatically. Now, if you mark up or stamp this received file, it's going to go ahead and automatically include it in reviewed, right? It's assuming you want to pass on that stamped or marked up file to the approver. Otherwise, if you don't need to make any markups, you can select from files that you received or add new files to be sent to the approver. Now down here, we don't have a file. It's just a physical item. It was shipped to us. So we're going to go ahead and indicate that it was received today, or that it was reviewed today, excuse me, and that we are shipping it on in turn to the approver. And then we'll go ahead and save. Right, so we've reviewed both of our items and they've now dropped down into reviewed. From here, things start to get pretty cyclical. Our next step is going to be to request approval of this submittal. That's sending email number 2. So I'm going to group these. Again, I don't have to. I could send a separate email for each item. But it may be more convenient for my approver if I group certain items together. So I checkbox the items I want to send in a single email, hit the tools icon, and create my request for approval. Much like the first email, we're going to indicate who we're sending it to, but we have 2 categories here, approvers and commenters. Approvers are the folks who can actually mark this approved or rejected. And we generally recommend just one approver. So when we click add, I'm going to go ahead and select my junk mail again, as well as the approver, so we can see what that email looks like. Generally, it'd be someone different, right? It's not going to be the vendor. It's going to be your architect, your engineer, maybe someone from your own company. Just depends on the situation. And then I can have as many commenters as I want. Those commenters can weigh in ahead of time, and then your approver can mark the final approval, which is just going to help the workflow move more smoothly. So let's add a couple of commenters here. We'll go ahead and add myself, and then we'll add Ashley. So we can indicate whoever we need and save. Submitted today, we can put in any reference or instructions if we'd like, and then just double check that you've got all the right items and that the due date, the critical date by which you need their answer, is accurate. You can edit that with the calendar there if you'd like. And then we hit save to create the email. Now the email's been created. We just want to view it and make sure it looks good before we send it out. So here's that email that we're going to be sending out. It's got the basic project information up top. It has who is a responder and who's a commenter, right? So our approver is up there as a responder. Commenters know that they can just weigh in. And as I go ahead and commit this, if I don't need to make any edits, we're going to see some buttons pop up there for details. Now, as a commenter, if I click on the details button, I can simply comment along the right-hand side here. Your commenters would weigh in first, and then what you're going to see here in a moment is that your approver has the ability to answer right down here in this section. So once it's committed, I can forward it out just to my commenters first, and then later forward it to my responder, or I can email it out to everyone at once. It just depends on how your workflow operates, what's best for you. I'm just going to go ahead and email this to my approver. We're going to remove those CCs, and we'll just email it to that one approver, and we won't add any message this time. And again, now you wait. You'll notice in here, as we refresh this page, under submitted, it's going to tell you that it's been emailed out and when the answer is due. Notice if your approver has any trouble, you do have that answer submittals option. You're going to be able to go ahead and answer it right from here on their behalf if needed. However, if we come back to that email inbox, we can see there's the request for approval. Very same email format. So your approver, be that the architect, the engineer, the customer, whoever that is, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to come down to this click here link at the bottom of the email. It opens up that same file for them, the same thing we saw when we were reviewing it. The due date's up here. They have access to view the full submittals log or download any files. And then they have their details buttons. Now, as the approver, notice that I have a response section here where my commenters did not. I can go ahead and respond. We have a default list of responses, but you can add additional or change the way that these are worded in your configuration menu. So I'm going to approve this one as noted. And it's important to note that if I need to attach any files, they can do the same thing that we did when we were reviewing it. They have the ability to view the file and mark up or stamp. So this can be used externally by your approvers as well. It's not just something that's available to you internally. They can stamp or mark it up if needed. However, if not, they don't have to add any files, right? They can simply put in their notes. See notes here, right? It was approved as noted. And then all this information of, who's approving and the date has been filled in for them. So they just go ahead and hit save. That will update, letting them know that this one has been answered, and we can go ahead and answer the second one. We'll call this one rejected as noted, and we'll say, please resubmit. We'll save that. Again, if there were any files they had wanted to include, they could. But now we've got our answers here. And as we return to your submittals page within your Flex database and refresh, those items drop down to answered. Now we can see that we've just got one last thing to do. We need to notify the provider, that vendor that submitted these. Now, approved as noted, we can see that this one is good to go. It's just fine. However, item number 2, that mixed design is grayed out and crossed out because it's been rejected as noted. If we come all the way back up to the top, what you'll see is that if something is rejected as noted, we will create you a revision item. It maintains the same number, but it has a revision 1 here. It'll show up as a separate item on your submittals log, and you can walk it through these steps just the way you did with the first one. So you can send that email out asking your vendor to resubmit, walk it back through the process. If you don't need that item, you can always check the box and delete it. But we do generate that automatically when the rejected as noted option is selected. Now from here, we're going to send that third and final email. This one I'll abbreviate just a little bit because it's going to look the same as the other 2 emails. Let's go ahead and create that notification to vendor. We put in our subject. I'm going to put in materials information approval. It's going to autofill the same individual that you originally sent it to. So whatever email number 1 was sent to, it's going to autofill that so that you don't accidentally send the answer back to the wrong person. Double check that you've got the right items and hit save to create the email. Let's view that email before we send it out. We can double check that all of our information looks correct and then simply commit it in order to send it out. Now from there, I would email that out. Going to the same people. I'm going to remove Ashley so I don't send her any junk mail. And then we should see that in my email inbox here momentarily. Okay, so there's that notice of submittal status. That is the notification to the provider. Same email format. They'll come down and click here. And then they're going to be able to acknowledge those items. There's that details button. All we're asking for is that they see the answer and any attached files, and they can go ahead and put in their response, accepted or not accepted. Now, the only time they're going to be able to choose not accepted is if something is approved as noted. It's approved with changes, right? They could say, hey, no, I can't accept that. And they can explain why those notes or changes won't work for them. And then the last one here, notice this one was rejected as noted. We don't have the option, or normally we won't. It looks like the settings have been changed here in our training database. But generally, the way the default settings work in the database is if something is rejected as noted, they do not have the ability to not accept. Their only option will be accepted if something has been rejected. And they can go ahead and say, we'll resubmit ASAP and save. Right, so once all those answers are in, we'll come back over to your Flex database, and you can see that those now show in acknowledged. And we see that the one that was approved as noted is now also grayed out and crossed out. That's because the provider did not accept the answer. So there's a mismatch between the approver saying, yes, we're good to go with these changes, and the vendor saying, I can't accommodate those changes. So in that case, you do have the ability to resubmit that as well. So it went ahead and generated a revision item for it as well. Even though the approver approved it, the provider says, hey, I can't accommodate those notes or changes. You've got a resubmission item here to go ahead and fix that mismatch. Now, anything along the way that you decide you don't need can be canceled and it'll sit here in step 10. But otherwise, that step 9 is the end of the road. So that's really it for our submittals workflow. I am going to show you the submittals log where you can find it really quick and a couple of other quick pieces of information. Submittals log is right here. You can pull that in real time at any point in time. And the best part about it is that it has customizable columns. We have an awful lot of columns in here that you can choose to include, but you can go ahead and remove any columns that you don't generally need. And you can save a selection for yourself personally. This is how I like to view it. I can hit save and that will be the default columns that I see every time I pull my submittals log. I can print this or save to PDF and email it out to folks if I want, or I can export it to Excel if I need to manipulate it in that format. Other reporting options we've got here. You have an outstanding submittals by vendor. That's going to allow you to see overdue items that are sitting in step 3 by vendor, and you can send each vendor a quick email to remind them of all of their overdue items. You've got a log for each of the separate emails you send out. The first one being the request for submittal, email number 2, your request for approval, and then your notification to vendor log. And then over here, a few additional pages. If you don't like viewing your submittals in this workflow format, you can come straight to the submittal items page, which looks more like the submittal log. It's going to list them in numerical order and show you their status in a column by column format. We also have a page for each of those different emails that you send, which is great because if you're not receiving the responses you're expecting, in these email pages, you can scroll over to the right-hand side and there is a log button, right? You've got your transmission or metadata log here. If you've used this in any other place in RedTeam, you know that this is very useful. This is going to show you when you sent the email, what message you included, who you sent it to, but even better, it's going to show you if they click the link. So let's say your vendor never marks those items as acknowledged. You can still prove that they've received the email and clicked the link so that down the road, when they say, hey, I wasn't aware of those changes, you can prove that you did your due diligence. You sent it to them. They did click the link. It's been received, even if they never mark it acknowledged. So that's just a great liability protection there. But that should do it for today. I appreciate you guys hanging in with me. I know we went just a little bit over time today, but we are going to go ahead and wrap it up. Are there any questions at all to finish off? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. This recording will be posted to our website, so feel free to review it there. Otherwise, join us next week for our next episode.